At this point, we've gone through mesh mix, select tools, the sculpting tool, the stamp tool. Now we're down to the edit tools. The edit tools have some pretty good things in there. Half of them I don't use, but I'll try to cover everything. When you go into the edit tool, it obviously is going to apply to the active STL on your scene. So if you have multiple STLs, you'll select the one you want by clicking on it, and then you'll open up your editing tool. Mirroring is pretty simple concept. Notice that a couple things. One, when you mirror, it has this plane that shows up, and you can flip that plane around depending on what direction you want to mirror something in. Notice that it can be turned, okay? So you can see that now I've got, oops, not that one, this one. Now I've got it mirroring in a different direction, okay? Let's bring it over to here. And then, and notice that there's no scaling, okay? This is the same things that you see in the transform tool minus the square and the cube, which makes sense because you're not going to scale and mirror at the same time. The other thing that's interesting though about mirroring is notice, let me turn on the frames. Notice that if what you're mirroring is going to touch like if one STL that you're mirroring and the one you are mirroring are touching, it connects them together. So if I do like this, it'll make an exact copy, and they will be combined, but you can easily separate them. I'll show you what I mean. So right here, it's just an exact mirror. And if you opened your object browser, you would notice that you only have one STL, but if you double click on this one and hit Y, now it's separated. Now you have two different rabbits or bunnies. I'm going to back up to here, and then I'm going to come in like this, and I'm going to hit accept, okay? Same idea that, you could technically double click on this and separate it. But what I'm pointing out here is that when you mirror something, it does connect those two pieces as one, okay? Meaning if I got rid of my face group, now it could be difficult to go in and reselect those. If I hit expand to connected, they are connected, so it goes to everything. So that is the mirroring tool. A lot of times I've seen this used in dentistry to take patients to, let's say the patient's missing number 8. You could take number 9, select it all, and then make a copy of it, and then mirror that into the space next door. And we can play around with stuff like that when we get into the dental applications. But yeah, that's mirroring. So let me go ahead and get rid of that and start, whoops, didn't mean to get a sphere, get our bunny. And then the next thing on the list in the edit is duplicate. This one's pretty easy. You hit duplicate, and it makes a duplicate of your bunny. If I move it over, see how it's made a duplicate. The thing that I would mention, I guess, about the duplicate is that you can get it from here, but you can also come and it's right here. So I rarely ever grab it from this menu because it's so much easier for me to click on something in my object browser and then click the little icon. And notice when it duplicates it, it puts it right on top of itself. And so if you want to see the duplicate, you can transform it so that they're side by side. So obviously there's going to be times where, especially in dentistry, where you're working on something and you need to, maybe you want to try something out and you don't want to screw up your original because you don't know if it's going to work. Make a copy of it, work on that one and see how it goes. Or if, I know there's other ways of doing this, but let's say that example I just gave of mirroring number 8 to the 9 position. You could make a copy of the whole set of teeth, the whole model, and then select just the tooth you want to mirror, delete the rest, and now you have a tooth to mirror. So I'm not saying that's how I would do it, but it's just an example. So that's duplicating, fairly straightforward. And then the last one, we kind of have already discussed it, because when we first got into Mesh Mixer, I thought it was important that you understand how to move around and how to, when you bring an object in, how to scale it and rotate it and pan it around. And those are the transform tools. And under edit it right here where it says transform. I never, ever really go here, because I always just use the keyboard shortcut T. It's just quick and easy. And so one thing that I would remind you of, if you've forgotten so far, is that there's some things here that you'll want to know about, but there's also, everything here is kind of also over here, and I'll explain what I mean. So this coordinate space where it says local or world frame, those are also controlled right here. I'm going to turn on the grid for a second. So you can see that the bunny and my local frame, if you will, is straight up and down. And if I click it over to world, they're exactly the same. Okay. But this local one, if I hit accept and then T again, notice that it stayed with my bunny. It's still showing like it's straight up and down, but the bunny has changed. If I switch to world right now, world is always in line with the grid. And one thing that, let me just open up. One thing about this grid that's interesting is that if you, I'm going to change my font to a little bit bigger. If you, in graphic design, I'll say, it probably spans a lot of different industries, but in graphic design, RGB is, or in art, I should also say, RGB, red, green, blue is standard. And with that being mirrored with the XYZ of 3D space, that's how they came up with these colors. So the red arrow is moving it along the X axis, the green along the Y, and the B is along the Z axis. So if you're ever kind of wondering what they mean, like if I'm looking at the green, I know that that's up and down, because I know that the Y axis is perpendicular to my plane. Okay, so just that's just something if you care to know that. Let's see, back into here. So that's the local and the world view. These right here are snapping. If you look down here, it says enable snapping, absolute coordinate sizes. So right here, if I hit snapping, and then I go to start to move it, notice how it's snapping in increments of 2.5. And see right here where it says 2.5. And so if I change that to 1, and then I grab over here, see how now it's snapping in increments of 1. Okay, and I can also change it by using my arrow key, and see how now it's snapping in different increments. So right now I'm hitting down, and as I go down, see how it goes 5. I guess that's the limit on that one, but 2.5, 2, 1, 0.5, 0.1. So, and that's just using the arrow keys. The right and left keys also do the same thing. Okay, but that's what snapping is. And if you notice, when you first start, let's do this. Let's hit extend. All right. So notice. Oh wait, I didn't mean to have that checked. Notice when I don't have the absolute checked, and it's just the snapping one that's checked, and I grab this, notice how it's at 0, and I can measure from there that was a -10, and that's a 5. See how it's always starting at 0? That's because it is snapping relative to the object itself and the position that it's in. If you do the absolute, which is also this A right here, now it's going off of the XYZ of the grid itself, okay? So if I take all of these and I bring them to 0, now it's in the very center, at least, you know, this thing. It's right in the center of the grid, okay? So that's the difference between the two. I imagine that more often than not, you're going to want to leave it unchecked, the absolute one unchecked, unless you're trying to measure it off of the whole entire scene. Just leave that unchecked. And so then the other thing that I want you to notice, let's hit accept and then T again. So everything is 0, 0, 0, scaling is 1. If you move up, see how the translate Y is going up in those increments of 5, and if I move it over, see how these numbers correlate? Well, you can also come in here and type in whatever number you want, and it'll move in that direction, okay? You can kind of see what I mean. Also, rotating. I just rotated it in negative 45 degrees along that plane, and I can do that same thing right here where I can take any of these and turn them specifically, okay? Scaling is the same idea. With scaling, I can take it and notice right here I have uniform scaling checked. Scaling it in the X direction, if I scale it by 2, notice that all of these changed to 2 because it's uniform scaling. This is just giving me measurements in the different directions, but that gives you an idea. So one fun application that we've used before is sometimes we don't mill our screw access holes in the zirconia, and yet we want to put it on a model that we can use to know where we want to drill our holes. And so what we'll do is we'll bring a model. Well, I would do it in Mesh Mixer. Kent does it in the printing software, but you can bring in your model, scale it by the same amount that the zirconia is, and then when you mill that zirconia, you can put it on your enlarged model and it'll fit. And so it's kind of a fun thing. But, you know, so in dentistry, you don't often scale things a lot, but you do at times. So that's the idea is, oh, and then just for the sake of thoroughness, I'll just mention that this arc here, which I often refer to as a pizza crust, is here. Let's do 1. All right, now we're back to where we started. This pizza crust here is what does the rotation, and notice that it rotates along the plane that you're on. And so, like we said, RGB, blue, that would be the Z-axis that this is rotating in. If I want to rotate it along the Y-axis, I would grab the green one. Then with these arrows, they only move it in the direction that the arrow is along. And then this one is better than the arrow because now I can move it in any direction. Let me turn off that snapping. I can move it in any direction I want. Okay, so this is more constrained and this is anywhere. This one in the center, or I'm going to hit accept and T again because sometimes it turns these off depending on what you've done. This right here is a scaling factor but only in one direction. So notice that the scaling of just the X is going wild, okay? And let me uncheck that and type 1 again. And but the one in the center here, this scales the entire rabbit. Okay, the entire STL file can get larger or smaller. So this tool becomes pretty useful when doing certain things because you can also transform a selection. So if that selection, I'm going to smooth the boundary real quick, but you can come in, and we already looked at this before, but you can transform something like that, and now you can see the power. You can move entire objects around. You can take part of an object and transform it. And so as you play around with things like that, it will give you the ability to do all sorts of fun things. One thing that you'll see us talk about later, because it's a way to increase a base, is you can grab a ring all the way around and then smooth that out, and then let's change it to the world view, and we can pull that straight down, and you can appreciate that now that, you know, this rabbit now has a little pedestal to stand on, but that's transforming. So go play around with that a little bit.